Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, an infant formula company on a mission to get a lot closer to the most superfood on the planet, breast milk. Our patented protein blend has more of the important and most abundant proteins actually found in breast milk. We're the first and only U.S.-made formula to use organic, grass-fed whole milk, not skim. We even conducted the largest clinical trial by a new infant formula company in a quarter century, with clinically proven benefits like easier digestion, less spit up, and softer poops versus a leading infant formula. And we make our own formula in the USA and our very own factories in Iowa, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Welcome to the Foul Pole to Foul Pole podcast, brought to you by Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, presented by the Till Valhalla Project, where heroes live on forever.
Hey, welcome back into the podcast. This is Tyler from Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, and this episode is brought to you by Best Breathing LLC. Jared and his team at Best Breathing have been helping families and homeowners since 1999. They specialize in mold control, mold inspections, crawl space encapsulation, air testing and sampling, sump pumps, foundation drains, water removal, air duct cleaning, and a slew of other services. All their technicians and inspectors are certified through the SEMI Mold Institute, and all their work is backed by warranties with first-class workmanship that is also guaranteed. With close to 25 years experience, let Best Breathing protect you and your home. When it comes to your family and home investment, you owe it to yourself to choose the best. Make sure you call Best Breathing today. That's 843-331-0678. 843-331-0678. Ask for Jared and tell him Tyler sent you. All right, without further ado, the guest today needs no introduction. It is Melissa Leiler, Coach LoLo. I am sure you guys have seen her all over social media, posting videos of her camps and clinics and workouts, really advocating for the outfield position. Thank you so much for joining me today. When did you fall in love with the game and decide, hey, this is my sport, and were you a multi-sport athlete?
So I was playing basketball and softball, and I did track a little bit growing up. And what really solidified softball was I did not make my 7th grade team. Go figure. I didn't make 7th grade team, and I was devastated. And I went back crying to my parents, and I was like, I want to play. And they were like, well, you need to play more. And I was like, okay, well, put me in anything that you can. And so I was in any city league that you could possibly get me into. And then I came back 8th grade year, and I made the 8th grade team. And then that's when I found competitive ball, because we had no idea back then. It wasn't like it is now. We didn't know that it was a thing. So we found out by word of mouth that there was this thing called travel softball. Right. And I tried out for the very first team, and I got on it. And ever since then, that was it. That was the sport. I didn't play anything else. I basically put blinders on. Right. And in travel ball, they told me that aid was to go get a college scholarship. I didn't know that was a thing. And when I heard that I could go play softball in college, after high school, that was it. That was the dream. That was all I thought about. So I just put on blinders, and I did everything I possibly could to go play ball in college. So I tell this to all my girls all the time, that if you think that you're late to the game, if you think you're behind, talk about somebody who was behind. That was me. I didn't start playing competitive till I was 13. So I basically went from a rec player to D1 athlete in 5 years.
Wow.
So I tell all my girls, if you think you're behind, I am living proof that you can do it because I only had 5 years to figure it out. So
That's incredible. That truly is. When you were playing in high school, going through sort of your recruiting process, it's a little bit different nowadays as far as the timing on stuff and the NCAA rules and kind of how that plays out. I mean, and that's a completely different subject, but tell us a little bit about your process, getting in the game a little bit later, but still working your process to make sure you got to the school that you wanted to go to and kind of make the most of it.
yeah, I mean, I was late to the game, and when I was a kid, they were allowed to recruit you when you were in 7th and 8th grade. So I didn't even make my middle school team in 7th grade. So I obviously was not on any college radar to be recruited.
Yeah.
So I was a late bloomer. It took me several years to become an athlete who could even be considered to play at any level in college.
Mhm.
So one thing that I think helped me was that I moved states in the middle of high school. Some people would be thinking like, oh, that is like the worst thing that can happen. But for me, it was actually the best thing because I grew up in Arizona. And if you know anything about Southern California and Arizona, especially 15 years ago, that's where softball lived.
Yeah.
That's where all the softball players kind of came from. And I moved from Arizona to Texas. So it was a whole new pool of colleges and coaches.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Texas, I was lucky enough to get on a team that had one goal in mind, and it was just to get the girls college scholarships. So we didn't really care about going to like national or anything like that. We didn't go to like ASA nationals. We didn't go to U-Trip nationals. We went to showcase tournaments, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And the only reason why we played in maybe qualifying tournaments was to go to these national tournaments. Like everybody knows the Colorado Sparkler tournaments. We went there every single year. We played this showcase tournament called the Ronald McDonald down in Houston. And that tournament is where I actually got recruited. I did not get started getting recruited till my junior year of high school. And I had several different levels of colleges looking at me, all the way from JUCO to D1. And I had to, kind of choose what type of level I wanted to be at.
Right.
The ultimate dream was to go D1. And I had one D1 offer, which was Marshall, and I took it. I wanted to get out of Texas because it wasn't home. So I only lived there for 2 years. So I didn't really have any ties to Texas. And I was already away from Arizona for a couple of years. So I was like, why not? Why not keep going further away? So I took the scholarship offer that they gave me, and I went there all 4 years.
Yeah. And you wind up on the East Coast when you spend most of your time playing in Arizona and Texas stuff. And I wanted to ask you, we hear this all the time from different athletes. It takes a lot of work to get to that level, but then I also hear coaches and athletes say that like once you get to the level, that's when the work actually begins, like on a whole new level. Because I mean, this is you're a student athlete, but it's like boom, this is your job day in and day out.
Yeah, it is your job. You don't have, time to have a job, even if you wanted to. Every level is different. So the higher profile school and the higher division level you go, you get less social and college, the quote unquote college experience that everybody else who's not an athlete talks about. So I went to mid-major D1. So I had some, college experience and social aspect. But when you go to a school like Oklahoma, University of Arizona, UCLA, schools like that are super high profile, they are there to win championships. Plain and simple. The coaches are paid to win championships. Right. So that is your job. you don't really have time for outside social hours. You are there to play ball. That's your job, and to keep your grades up in order for you to play ball.
Right.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have weeks where you have, 20-hour basically practice weeks. And then depending on what time of, season you're in, you have 8-hour weeks, and then you're expected to do extra work to make sure that you are ready come first weekend of February for preseason ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had a successful career. You had an exciting career. Take us through sort of your mentality of going in as a freshman and continuing to progress and get better, and eventually making your way on and becoming sort of a staple with the program, and how you kind of went through that process as a student athlete.
Yeah, I will say I don't think I was ready for the D1 level my freshman year. When I went to college, I did not do weightlifting until I went to college. I think it's great that now that athletes are actually doing weightlifting before they go to college, because you need some padding on you to help with injuries. So you need that extra layer of muscle to make sure that you're ready to play at that level.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. It wasn't a thing to be basically weightlifting before you went to college.
Yeah.
I also, when I went to college my freshman year, there was 2 senior outfielders. So there's only kind of one position open in the outfield, and there was 3 of us that rotated in. So in conference, you have like 3-game series. So each one of the 3 of us, played each game, and that kind of went on until basically coach was like, until one of you proves to me that you deserve that spot consistently, we're going to rotate you in. And that went like that the whole season up until the last conference series. And I finally showed them that it was mine.
Yeah.
And so the last conference, I showed them, we played Houston, and I was basically the person that they put out there all 3 games. And then I was the right fielder as well for postseason. We went to conference tournament and everything.
Yeah.
And then when the seniors left, then I moved over to center for, sophomore, junior, senior year. I kind of fluctuated back and forth between center and left between junior and senior year. Didn't really matter to me. I just wanted to be out there and play. Yeah. But I will say that I didn't get the outfield coaching until I went to college. So that's one thing that's lacking in the lower levels is specific outfield coaching in competitive and travel ball. Most practices when you're in competitive, and it's still like this to this day, outfielders basically get 20 to 30 minutes of fungo, and then they go run for the infield situations or bunt situations. That's not enough to be able to get them where they want to go.
Yeah.
It's not enough anymore.
Well,
so that's one of the reasons why I started my lessons business. I started really consistently doing it a couple of years ago when the 2021 Women's College World Series, the outfielders finally got some recognition.
Yeah.
For the first time, I think in the whole game, we finally got some recognition that we make a difference out there on the field. Yeah. And you saw it in Oklahoma. Without that one specific diving catch that Jada Coleman made in that final JMU Oklahoma matchup, yes, we all know that Oklahoma ended up dominating the game. But if Jada Coleman did not make that catch, that swung momentum back in Oklahoma's favor, who knows what would happen in that game. Yeah. In my opinion, that one catch, basically, that won the game because it swung the momentum back in Oklahoma's favor. And that's all Oklahoma needed was the momentum shift back in their favor to get their confidence back. And then they go and they rip the ball and they do what they do best.
Yeah. I mean, we see it.
That's what won the game.
I mean, and you can speak to it. The momentum plays a huge part in a lot of sports, and none bigger than softball. I mean, a diving catch, a double play, strike out, throw them out, something like that. It just takes that one moment to swing it back. I mean, you could be down 3 runs, 4 runs, or whatever. Just takes one catch, and then, like you said, but it turned it around, and then look, Oklahoma's out here writing history, going for a three-peat this year. It's crazy. So, yeah, I do want to get into the lessons and sort of the business that you've created, focusing on outfield. We talked a little bit before we started recording this, and we talk about the mentality. So I want to kind of break down the 3 positions and talk about the overall mentality of playing the outfield and what it truly means and how important it is, so that the young ones that are listening to this can understand, like, hey, you're not just stuck out in the outfield. You have a job, you have a role, and your role is just as important. So let's talk about that mentality switch that we would like these young athletes to kind of make, so that they kind of embrace that role and put it on the forefront.
Yeah. The outfield, the mentality is completely different than the infield. The infield, it's all about, reaction and knocking the ball down, because in a lot of cases, if you muff it a little bit, you can still get the girl out. Unless if you're talking about a slapper, you have to be perfect. And if you're not, they're going to beat you anyways. In the outfield, you have a lot more time to think about what's going on. So I personally believe that outfield is the 3rd hardest position out there on the field. Pitcher is the hardest. Catcher, I believe, is the 2nd hardest, because that is a thankless job back there behind the plate. People don't notice you until the ball gets past you, basically, is what happens. Or if you throw somebody out. Otherwise, you're kind of like behind the curtain, and you have to make the pitcher look good. The 3rd hardest position is outfield. You have only 3 players and they have to cover the entire grass out there. And it's not just foul line to foul line. You're talking fence line to back fence line. We have to cover it all. And I'm sorry, but there's 6 players in the dirt. I'm not saying that that's easy, but outfield, like, you've got to be able to react immediately off the bat. Mm-hmm. So outfielders, you have to be athletic. You need to have a good reaction time off the bat and be able to have that aggressive, fearless mentality. Otherwise, you'll never be able to be successful out there. And if you notice, I do not say you have to be the fastest person on the team to be an outfielder. That's not what it's about. Yeah. Does speed help you? Absolutely. You do see a lot of speedsters out there. But if you notice, when you look at professional softball, whether it's the WPF or Athletes Unlimited, there's girls out there who aren't the fastest. And I'll tell you what, they're good outfielders. Yeah. One of them is Amanda Lorenz.
I was going to say her name. I went and watched her play.
She's a first baseman.
Yeah, she's rolling first base, and then the next inning, she's out there playing left field and holding it down, because her first step is like lightning off the bat.
Exactly. That's what you have to have as an outfielder. You have to have cat-like reactions off the bat. Your first step is everything, and it's not always back. That's a misconception. It's not always back. It's a first step towards where the ball's going to land. Because if you think about it, if your first step is always back and you have a sinking line drive, you'll never be able to catch that ball, because your momentum is going back and shift forward. You're never going to be able to make that play. So if you know how to react off the bat, your first step's going to be in, so that way you can only take 4 steps and you still make that dive and catch. If your first step is back, that ball is going to drop in front of you every single time, and your coaches are going to yell at you every single time to try to go after and catch that ball. Yep. So in my opinion, I think outfield is so hard to play. It took me a long time to really get good and figure it out. And the fundamentals come first, but the thing that really elevated me to, I think, be able to play at that next level is the mental side of the game. Because you have to know kind of like the anatomy of a lineup. Even if you don't know the team that you're playing, when you go to these national showcase tournaments, you're not going to know the teams that you're playing. You don't know the percentages of where they hit the ball, but you can kind of figure out where you should position yourself by the lineup, by where they are in the lineup. So your first 3 hitters are usually your steady Eddie hitters, right? And then you have your heart of the order, which is 4, 5, 6. Should play a few steps back on them. And then when you go down to the bottom of the lineup, 7, 8, and 9, they're going to be more steady Eddie hitters again. So if you just know that alone, you can help yourself with the depth of where you're going to play.
Yeah.
And that helps you a lot. The heart of the order, give them a few steps. And then everywhere else in the order, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, you can go back to your normal positioning. And then you want to make sure that you're pinching the gaps versus going out towards the lines, because the odds of them hitting the gap is a lot higher than them actually pulling one down the line. So, because most hitting coaches, they teach gap to gap power.
Right.
So if you pinch the gap, you're able to cut off the ball in the gap, so that way it doesn't hit the fence, and you're able to make those catches. Where if you're spread out towards a line, you won't be able to make those on the flanks when you're in left or right field. Yeah. So, and then you have a lot more coverage in the gap, right? So that way you have the center and left fielder and left center gap, nothing's going to drop there. And then the center and the right fielder, nothing's going to drop there either. So when you pinch the gap, you're able to make those plays that other outfielders aren't going to be able to make.
Yeah.
And what coaches look for when you're trying to go to college and get recruited, they know just how hard outfield is to play. They're looking for players that make it look easy.
Makes sense.
That's what they're looking for. That's the only reason why I got my scholarship.
Well, like elite level,
because they were
the ones that play the outfield that are like yourself. It's almost like you anticipate a little bit, like your first step is so fast that it's like you can either tell the way her shoulders are, her hips are, the way her feet are, like you're reading the pitch location or something, and you can look at Jada Coleman, you can look at Riley Boone, you can look, I can name a bunch of them, but it's like that very first step. It's like you're reading tendencies, and especially like if you're playing in conference and you're able to see film or you kind of know what's going on. But if you can't, you're able to read something that's there. And I don't know if it's something that I know it's intangible, but if you could kind of help us understand, like, why you guys are so like a half step faster than great athletes.
Yeah, it's all about anticipation. So we all get the pitches that are being called, right? Now they do the armbands with the numbers that, we didn't have. So everybody would like put the arms behind their back and then give us the numbers and where the pitch was going to be. So if we have a pitcher who's a power pitcher, so that means she's pitching, 65, 70 miles an hour. Okay, if somebody gets a hold of that ball, it's going to go. So if I got the heart of the order up, I'm probably going to scoot back 3 or 4 steps in general, especially when I have one of the pitchers on my squad who's pitching 65, 70 miles an hour. Because if they get a hold of it, it's going somewhere. So that's one way to anticipate. Another way is to know what happens when a ball is being hit, depending on what ball is being pitched. So a curveball, same thing when you have a left-handed hitter or a right-handed hitter. Mm-hmm. Since I was left-handed, I was a slapper. So if I hit the ball to left center to left field, that ball is going to tail and slice pretty much every single time. Right. So you play the odds and the percentages. So when I was in left field and I had a slapper up, I would actually play a little more towards the line because I know that ball's going to slice towards that line. The odds of them actually hitting the ball and it staying more towards center and left center, not going to happen. Right. So that's one way you can anticipate, and that's how you can kind of play the odds and you play the percentages. If you got a big power hitter up that's right-handed, it's probably going to go to left field or center. The odds of them hitting right center aren't that great. So that right fielder can shift over to right center a little bit more, maybe 2 or 3 steps, nothing too crazy. Right. And then everybody else can shift just a little bit. So you get the coverage, and then the left fielder also has the foul territory that they can cover in the corner.
Yeah. You're talking about the foul territory. Talk about how critical it is to find the fence, whether it's the deep fence or it's the foul down the line fences. How critical and how important it is for the athletes before a game, between the innings or whatever, just making sure we find the fence. We know how many steps we can take. We start to get our hand out just a little bit to start to feeling that fence. We're catching it out of our periph. Talk about the fence a little bit for the outfielders.
Yeah, you have to know your field, and every field is different.
Right.
So you should have some sort of pregame routine when you go to a field and figure out, what the grass is like, or are you playing on turf?
Yeah.
Because is the grass fluffy? Is it cut really short? Is it going to come at you fast? Or is the grass going to slow it down? Is it kind of bumpy?
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And then you want to know if you have a warning track or not. A lot of times when you're in competitive ball, when you're traveling, they have breakaway fences because they play on slow pitch fields. So you don't have a warning track. So you have to really rely on your other outfielders to tell you how far you really are from the fence. And you have to learn how to put your hand out or your glove out. And depending on if you need to go up high or low, depending on how high that fence is. So that way you can actually feel for the fence. Yeah. And you should be actually going and getting some fence balls from your coach in pregame. Yeah. So that way you can figure out exactly where that fence is and where you're positioned normally compared to where the fence is too.
It's critical. And you mentioned something too about the communication. Communication is a huge part of softball. And talk a little bit about the communication from the outfielders back into the infield and the three outfielders communicating with each other as far as hitting cuts. Our back is turned to the play. The communication is being relayed, and why it is so important for the outfield to be just as loud as everybody else on the field.
Yeah, I am a firm believer that I have the phrase like be loud, be proud of your position out there for the outfielders. When you're in practice, I firmly believe that outfielders should be more vocal than infielders because we're so much further away from everything and from the plays. So, and I also believe that outfielders should have a different call for the ball than infielders. So if infielders are saying mine, then outfielders need to say ball, ball, ball. So what that does is when you're calling for it at the same time, you can hear the difference. So if an infielder is saying mine, but then they hear the outfielder coming in saying ball, 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 they'll get out of the way. But if you are yelling the same thing at the same time, that's where you have a lot of collisions that'll happen. So I'm a firm believer that you need to have two different calls. Outfielder has one call, infield has the other call. Whether it's ball, mine, I got it, whatever it is, Every coach needs to figure that out. And then the outfielders need to create their own little culture and their own lingo. Yeah. So one of the phrases that outfielders always say is nothing drops. Yeah. Nothing drops in our outfield. You have to own the grass. It is yours. I would get really offended if an infielder caught a ball on my grass. Yeah. Like if I was playing really far back and I know I can't get to it and the infielder has to take charge and come out, to the short fly ball area and get it, I would always get, kind of mad because it's my grass. Like you stay in the dirt, that's your job. The grass is mine. But that's another story.
Let's start to talk a little bit about what coaches can do to start implementing some of these drills that don't necessarily take a whole lot of time for a team practice, but these athletes can work on their own as well, and they can start to implement this stuff. Because there's, like you said, there's a lot of coaches. I'd say 90% of the coaches don't focus enough on the outfield, and there's probably even a higher percentage of coaches that don't focus on the outfield. So what is some of the stuff that you see that that works and can start to sort of develop a little bit more control in the outfield versus just running infield stuff?
The first thing is going to be doing drop steps every single time they do defensive practice.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do, like, infield has their dailies where they do grounders, middle, forehand, backhand.
Mm-hmm.
Outfielders need to be doing drop steps. You start out with a real ball and a leather glove, and once they get really good at that, then move them to tennis balls. I love tennis balls. It's my favorite tool to work with.
Yeah.
Because if you can catch a tennis ball barehanded, you can catch softball with a big leather glove. That's just how that works. Works on so many things at the same time. It works on soft hands, so they're not reaching for it. I love tennis balls. So drop step series, there's so many different drop step series. I have one that I like. I have one for like my lower level, whether it's beginner and intermediate. And then I add some more drop steps when they're advanced and elite status to work on, having your eye off the ball just for a split second to make a turn or something like that. Another thing is to work on their running form. Running form is huge for outfielders because we run to the ball every single time before we do anything. Before we field it on the ground or in the air, to the side, it doesn't matter. We are sprinting.
That's a great point.
Running form is key. And this is one thing that probably makes me unique with outfield, but I don't subscribe to the tuck and run. It does not put you in a balanced position to be able to run. I actually call it like a chicken wing because they're here. And then the other hand is up like would be for, like an Olympic sprinter.
Yeah.
So when you tuck your glove, your hand kind of looks like this, and it doesn't make sense. Because if you take your glove off, you don't run the bases this way. So why would you run with your glove that way? And so I have 8-year-olds that the light bulb goes on. So I tell them to bring that back to their coach. I'm like, hopefully I can get a coach who's an adult to have the light bulb go on too.
Right.
At the same time.
That makes sense.
So because your glove, everybody calls it an extension of your hand. So it should be the same when you're running.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take your glove off, it should look like this when you're running. We want to look like Olympic sprinters because that's the kind of level that we kind of need to be at because we have all that grass to cover. And with the angles and the intensity of play, we don't have a lot of time to be able to get up into our sprint stride. So footwork is key. So the first step, it has to be big. We need to be in our sprint stride within our first 3 movements. Most outfielders have like false movements, whether they go forward or it's just a jump in the air.
Mm-hmm.
My first movement is immediately towards the ball, and it's a big step. It's over exaggerated. So that way I can get into my sprint stride. And I go through the whole thing of like when you're walking your stride, how short it is. And then jogging, it's a little bit bigger. And when you're sprinting, it is massive.
Yeah.
So your first step, that massive step that allows you to get into your top speed within 3 steps. That's how you see all those outfielders make those amazing catches, especially in the gaps. Because all of a sudden you see them, they're like this far away from the ball, and all of a sudden out of nowhere they come and grab it.
Yeah.
Is because they get in their sprint stride within 2 or 3 steps and they hit their top speed. That's the goal because we have to cover all that grass in a short amount of time.
Yeah. I think what's so impressive.
So running form.
Those little loops that you were talking about that are getting in, they're just not getting in as much as they used to because these outfielders now have world-class speed, and that first step is now getting them there instead of letting a ball drop right at that last step. They're able to actually get to that ball. And there's a lot of girls that are able to get to that on that dive that, maybe in years past, they weren't able to get to because now there's been such a focus put on it of, okay, we can handle infield. Let's start focusing and start training at an earlier age with the outfield stuff. And that top end speed within 3 steps is the reason why these girls are able to get to so many balls.
Exactly. That's what that's what college coaches are looking for with outfielders. A lot of times outfielders are the last ones to be recruited. So that's kind of like how it is, unfortunately, at this point.
Yeah.
So when they're looking for actual outfielders, they're looking for amazing athletes that can do amazing things and make things look really easy out there on the grass, because it's not easy to make those plays. In my opinion, the hardest ones to make are the ones that are hit straight at you.
Yeah.
Whether they're sinking like drives or the ones straight over your head. So I didn't learn this until college, but instead of literally turning and going straight back, if you turn and get your body out of the way, it makes it so that you're on, maybe like a foot to foot and a half away from the ball, so you can actually see the trajectory and you can read where it's going to land, because we need that as outfielders.
Yeah.
We have to see and project where it's going to land. That's what allows us to get there and get behind it and do all of these amazing things to be able to throw back in on a dime.
Yeah.
So if we go straight back, you cannot see like the highest point, like the apex of the ball and how it falls out of the sky, because they all fall differently. Some of them, they get hung up in the wind and then they just drop. Some of them are aligned and they kind of have one of these movements, and then some of them are actually high fly balls and then they come down a little more this way. When it's hit straight at you, you can't see that. So if we get to the point where we can move our body out of the way only a foot to a foot and a half, your arm is longer than a foot or a foot and a half.
Right.
So that way your glove is now in this position or in this one rather than one that's like right here. That is why young girls turn and backpedal, which is the last thing that we want to do. So when going straight back on, I teach them to get their bodies out of the way, but their glove is still there. And if you're a little bit further away, your last step in towards the ball is all you need. It's a higher percentage catch. So I know before we hit record, we were talking about Riley Boone's catch, the one that was hit straight over her head. Her body most likely was slightly off from the ball, so she could actually make that catch.
Yeah.
So she could see just how far back she really needed to go to be able to make that catch.
Yeah.
So I bet if you go and you look back at that video, you'd see it.
One thing that you were leading to that I want to make sure we hit on is outfielders being able to work behind the ball so that they can get that throw back into the infield and, throw it on a dime like they're supposed to, instead of kind of getting to it at the last moment, making a catch, stumbling a couple of steps, and then throwing the ball, actually being able to work behind the ball so their momentum is carrying everything back forward.
Yeah, you want to get behind the ball and create momentum coming back in as much as you can, because everybody talks about throwing and how outfielders, hit your cutoff man or whatever. You should throw through your cutoff, not to them. But when we're working on precision throws, like outfielders have to have precision throws. And the perfect throw is all in the setup before you even catch the ball. That's how that works. Okay. So the throws that you see all over social media, these outfielders throwing out these runners at home plate and at third, that's how they do it. They set it up so they're waiting behind the ball and they're having the ball basically as if it was going to land, maybe 4 or 5 feet out in front of them. And then they bring their momentum back in and they catch the ball on their throwing shoulder side. Mm-hmm. So that way it's an easy transfer to their throwing hand. And then they're able to get that powerful crow hop and they get their entire body into that throw and they snap hard down and they hinge at the waist at the end. So that way the ball has a downward trajectory this way, just slightly. That way the ball doesn't sail and it's not a rainbow. Yep. And when you go through, when you're trying to hit your cutoff man, we're not actually throwing to them, we're throwing straight through them. So we actually don't want to hit them in their chest. If you aim right at their throat, what it does, it creates this perfect long hop every single time. I'm a huge proponent of long hop throws instead of trying to get it there all the time. Because if you try and get it there in the air, a lot of times it's kind of like a rainbow arc and I want a dart throw, I'd rather have it hit the dirt one time. And what it does, it skips and it brings the throw exactly where you want it every single time. It makes it so much easier for whoever is receiving the ball because they've got a lot going on. So we don't want to short hop them because they have to come up and back down. If I'm the person running, I'm safe. No ifs, ands, buts about it. But if you have the perfect throw, that's the perfect one hop and it's right here, and they just go and they tag the runner, more often than not, they're going to get the runner.
Yeah. It's like
and the other
from the
thing
catcher.
with,
It's
I
like
talk
you're throwing them, you want to throw them into the play. You're throwing them into the action instead of having them figure out where they're going to catch it from or having to come down and up and then making a play here and trying to make the play there. You're trying to help them. And I mean, you throw it, like you said, throw it on a dime. I mean, it's really going to help the infielders out to make their play.
Yeah, I talk about precision throwing with outfielders because so if you're like a shortstop or third baseman and your throw is off by, let's say, 3 inches or so when it goes to first base, okay, well, the throw is what? Let's say it's like 60, 80 feet away, it's not that far. So a first baseman can make up for that 3, maybe 4-inch throw where it's off. When you're in the outfield and you're throwing from, let's say center, left field, right field, and you're throwing to the plate, if you are off by 3 inches when you start your throw, it's going to turn into 3 feet. So your target may be this big, but it actually needs to be this big. If you aim small, you miss small. And our feet have to be set up perfectly so that every single time, because if we're off, an inch is a foot when you're talking 150, 160 feet away. That's the difference between a run and an out.
Yeah.
So we have to be so much more accurate, in my opinion, than infielders. Because if we're not, it turns into feet one way or the other.
Right.
And when you see that, everybody's like, oh, happened. Like, well, like if I was an infielder, it'd be fine.
Let's talk a little bit about long toss, that what these girls can do kind of on their own in their warm-ups and stuff that can kind of help them and help propel them into making those longer, more accurate throws instead of just winging it, hoping it's somewhere close. Talk about how important a long toss is on those outfielders, just like a catcher, make it to get that strong, that throw stronger and more accurate, have some confidence in it, because we know softball is all about confidence. The more confidence you got, the better you're going to play.
Exactly. Confidence is a huge part of the game. And with long toss, I noticed that a lot of outfielders, they don't throw with outfielders when they're warming up. It's important that you kind of throw with outfielders because you need to take longer warming up than everybody else because you need to do long toss. So it's important that you spend an extra like 10 minutes after everybody else is kind of done warming up and you go as far back as you can. And I tell all my girls, I'm like, don't do a crow hop, just launch it. And at that point, it is going to be a rainbow. That's fine. But it's basically a way for you to strengthen your arm without doing weights.
Yeah.
So if you stand there and you give it all you got and it's going to be a rainbow, that's fine. But you get to see where it lands. So let's say the first time that you do this, you have 3 hops until it hits your throwing partner. And then, a month later, then you only have 2 hops. Then a month after that, you only have 1 hop. And then before you know it, within, maybe 4 or 5 months or so, you're able to hit your throwing partner in the air without a crow hop.
Yeah.
And then once you're done doing some of the long toss, it's important that you do game-like situations where you toss a ball up to yourself in the air and you actually get a crow hop in. You do 2 or 3 of those, and you do the same thing for do or die ground balls. So you have to put those into your warm-up routine. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to practice those because just as well as I do, fungo's not enough, and you have to be super intentional with the time that you do have at practice with your team.
You don't have time to get it all in.
No, you don't. And so you have to be very intentional with everything that you're doing at practice, because you only have 2, maybe 3 hours at practice for that day. So be intentional with your warm-ups, and then especially when you're doing hitting practice and it's live hitting, I would get people out of my way, and I'd be like, don't come in, the center field from gap to gap in center. Like everybody else, you can shag, just stay away from me.
Yeah.
And I use that as basically outfield practice.
Yep. That is such a great point, Melissa. I swear I am going to implement that with some of the teams that I work with. And like, you hear it all the time. It's y'all go out and shag some balls. Don't go shag balls anymore. Give me like 3, and then you'll get a few, and then let's rotate 3 in there, and let's work communication. Let me work my range. There's so many things you can do in that shagging ball process that it was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah. And I even tell my girls, I still do it to this day because it's such a habit now. So when you are like putting balls back in the bucket, right? You like throw them in, and then the throws are off, and you have to go get them and put them back in the bucket. So for outfield, I always went up to the ball like I was doing a do or die.
Yeah.
Every time. Or I would practice like my backhands, because as an outfielder, you should know how to do backhands as well to cut off balls in the gap or down the line. You're just running, and then you go to an infielder about 4 or 5 steps away from the ball. So practicing all of that, and not just picking the ball up and putting it in the bucket, practicing those things is huge. That's how you get really good at the little things. My coach in college, she now is the coach at Indiana, Shonda Stanton. Mm-hmm. She always talked about excellence. And it's the excellence in the little things is what makes a difference between the good teams and the great teams.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Coach, how can we get a hold of you? How can we get these fine folks to reach out to you and get some of your videos, get some of your drills, get some of your tips and stuff like that? What's the easiest way for them to find you?
I'm active on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Melissa Leiler. And from there you can see my softball pages as well. So I actually have a free outfielders guide as well. So if you DM me, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Melissa Leiler, and you can DM me the word free, and I'll send you my free outfielder guide. It's all about the 4 traits of an elite outfielder.
And we will definitely have that link down below. So you'll see it down below on the bottom of this, whether you're seeing it over there on YouTube or you're getting it on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, wherever you're listening to it at or watching it. Click the link down below, and we'll make sure you're able to get over to her. And I'm telling you, take it from me, she will respond to you. I promise you she will. She is busy. She's a busy bee. She's a workaholic. But she will definitely get a hold of you. Melissa, it has been a lot of fun catching up with you. I hope we get to do this again. I want to break down some of the action from this year as far as softball, kind of get your take on that. We want to, maybe take apart some of the videos. We'll look at good outfield play. We'll look at not so great outfield play, some of the changes that could have been done, and some of the things that the girls are doing right, and sort of recap the season. So I hope you join me for that.
Yeah, I'd love to break down the season, and especially outfield plays. There's been some amazing plays, and then there's been some plays that I think, we could do better. So I think it's good to break down the good and the not so good.
You made a great point earlier about it's about saving runs in the outfield. It's not necessarily saving a base, because if you make an error on the infield, you might give up 60. You make a mistake, one step wrong, you're giving up maybe 120, maybe a run. I mean, it's usually 2 bases. It's a 2-base mistake in the outfield, and that's why it's so important.
Yes, that's outfielders save games. We save runs.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I hope we catch up and do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Big time shout out to Coach LoLo dropping in, giving us a whole bunch of knowledge on the outfield positions and giving us a little bit of perspective on what it truly means to be out there. I mean, it's not a punishment. It's a big integral part of the game. We're saving runs out there. There's a lot that goes into it. We can't just stick somebody out there and say, hey, go make a catch. There's a lot that goes into it. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, please do me one favor. Share this with a friend, and when you do, you tell them you love them.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.